Hello, everyone. It's TripleZHacker here, and today I have a Shogun 2 unit tier list for multiplayer, and specifically Avatar Conquest. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with how a tier list works, but for those who are not, basically we're going to take these lovely Shogun 2 units here and place them on a set of tiers in a ranking system. Now, before we jump into how I'm going to be determining what ranks each of these units are and the exact tiers I've listed out, um, this is my opinion and it's completely subjective. So if you feel like I've made a mistake or disagree with any of the decisions I've made, please jump into the comment section and say, why you would rank, how you would rank these units and where exactly would you place them on a tier list. Anyways, let's get things started. So the four factors we're going to be considering when judging these units, of course, is the default stats. How good are they just as a regular, units? They each have their stats: melee attack, melee defense, charge, etc. And so, how does that factor into their performance? Obviously. The next factor we're going to be judging, of course, is cost. How expensive are these units? Because cost is a huge factor when it comes to multiplayer, as you're only allocated a certain amount of funds when it comes to your armies. The next factor we're going to be considering is veteran upgrades. When you make these units veteran, or if they start veteran, as DLC units, how good are they with each upgrade? How much does their price increase? How much does it better their stats with the upgrades? How much better do they perform? And of course, with being able to perform comes obviously the last factor we're going to be considered, and that's how well do they do on the battlefield? Their overall performance. And that is probably where the most subjectivity comes in, because I'm going to be using my own experience when it comes to Shogun 2 multiplayer to be judging that. But for the most part, how practical are the units, and basically how well are they able to achieve their functions? All right, so let's get this thing started. The tiers we have, of course, the top tier is the cheaters. This tier is the units that have broken Shogun 2. They've broken the game. They pretty much invalidate about 70% of the other units here, and this one unit can win you a full battle when used properly. Next tier we have is godly. These units are really, really good. Of course, they're godly. But they're a unit that you definitely want to bring and can win you the battle. If you use them properly, and can overall just change the balance of power in your favor. Next here we have is great. These units comprise, or are basically used in every single army. You really want to bring these units here on this tier if you want to win the battle. Next we have is decent. These are the good units that are. They'll get the job done on occasion. They're not really necessary, and they won't win the battle for you, but they're a unit just to generally have that you want in your armies on occasion. Overall, not a bad pickup for your armies, but certainly not in the top echelon of Shogun 2 units. Next one we have is cost efficient. So the units here are pretty much just, units that perform well for the amount of cost that you have to pay to use them, so to speak, or to put in your armies. Next tier is pretty self-explanatory as well, overpriced, just units that aren't worth it. They're not worth bringing. Next tier is memes. Now these are just silly, fun units that people love using on occasion, not really for serious competitors. Last tier, of course, is pathetic. Just really bad units. Generally don't want to bring them whatsoever. And then the final tier, of course, is burning dumpster fire trash. So this tier is just straight garbage. Never, ever, ever in any situation bring these units. They're so bad. They're putrid. All right, so the first unit we have to judge on these tiers is, of course, the Waco Raiders. Now, the Waco Raiders, pretty good unit. I'm going to place them in cost efficient. Now, they are a DLC unit, so if you do upgrade them over time with the veteran upgrades, I'm sure they can get a little expensive, but they do start out at, I think, 520 Koku, and they're a pretty good unit with their Kisho training to get maybe buildings. As long as you're able to eventually get over there and protect them before they get smashed with Calvary or something. But they can be a pretty, a good unit to throw your opponent off, maybe capture a key building, and they have decent stats. Right, next up we have the Bo Ashigaru. The Bo Ashigaru, while being, relatively good in campaign, at least for the early game, is going to go down here. They're burning dumpster fire trash. Just a terrible unit. Not even really worth bringing. Even if you upgrade them, I don't really think the payoff is that rewarding. Ultimately, just low missile damage, low morale, low armor. They die really easily. You're better off just bringing another unit if you're in a small, funds battle. I mean, if you have extra space and you need some missiles, maybe bring them, but generally don't really need them. All right, next up we have the Bow Warrior Monks. This unit right here is going to go on the Great tier. Now, you're probably thinking that they probably belong up in the Godly tier. Now, I understand that, but ultimately their armor is what makes them pretty weak. Ideally, they're not really in an engagement with other bow units, but you really want them in your armies. You can't afford not to have at least one or two veteran units of Bow Warrior Monks. Just overall, one of the best units in the game, and certainly in multiplayer, have their range is incredible. Right, next up, we have the long Yarya Shigaru, and we're going to place this unit up in Godly. Now, they are a DLC unit, so if you don't have the DLC, that sucks for you, but the long Yarya Shigaru, just a beefier version of the Yarya Shigaru, and they can, if you're spear specialization, you can give them hold firm, which increases their morale for a period of time, but they also have a ton of melee defense, and they can have pretty solid morale, and in Yari Wall, they can be pretty devastating. They can beat Katana Samurai, even veteran Katana Samurai, some of them at least. So overall, just a great unit to have. Definitely a staunch defense, at least a staunch defensive unit. All right, next up we have the Bandits. The Bandits are going to go down here. Now, I haven't really used them much personally, so this is I have a little bit of bias in this decision, but ultimately just not a really good unit. Not really worth bringing. The Kisho training doesn't really help, and yeah, I don't even know. The Kisho training doesn't really help you because they're very vulnerable and they're a missile unit. So what are they going to do? Okay, next up we have the Katana Samurai. And this unit right here is probably going to go up in the Great tier. And I'll probably put them ahead of the Bow Warrior Monks. You need Katana Samurai. You need it as a unit. It can be really pretty much your main offensive infantry units. Katanas just cut through a lot of other units on this list. When as a veteran, they're pretty good. They have solid balanced stats, decent melee defense, can have a good charge, can have great melee attack. Overall, just a really, really good unit and something that you want to bring in your armies. All right, next up we have the Naginata Warrior Monk Calvary. Now, this unit we're probably going to throw right into decent. I've fought some players who have used this unit quite a bit. I personally don't use them too much, but they can have Warcry when upgraded. They also they can have a ton of melee defense. They can be really good in extended cavalry engagements, but in the initial charge and everything, they can get killed rather quickly. So definitely an interesting unit to bring. They certainly have their purpose though, and they're pretty cost efficient in comparison to some other cavalry units. So definitely a unit that you can bring and one that I would recommend bringing on occasion. All right, next up we have the Fire Rockets. This unit is going in the Godly tier. Fire Rockets are amazing, the best siege units in Shogun 2. If you're doing a siege, you definitely need them. On land battles, they can be devastating with general sniping, and I mean, they can be sometimes inaccurate, but if you're able to hit a few good volleys with them, they can change the outcome of a battle because they're so devastating. And next up, we have the Naginata Warrior Monks. Naginata Warrior Monks are going to place on the Great tier, and I'm probably going to put them. I put them here for now. I've seen people use Naginata Warrior Monk spams effectively, and you can get several retainers to boost them. I won't put them above Katana Samurai because of the fact that Naginata Warrior Monks tend to have, they're vulnerable to missile fire. And unless you have the right buffs and everything, they're okay in melee. I mean, you can give them some retainers to get their melee defense super high, and also they have a high morale, so you definitely want to bring them. I'm just not on the level of Katana Samurai, but overall, really great unit. And next up, we have the Matchlock Ashigaru. Now, this unit right here is going to go on the Godly tier. And the reason being is because they're a gun unit, and with 2 volleys, they can practically kill any unit in the game. And they're super cheap, so they're really cost efficient. And overall, just an amazing unit because guns are so powerful in Shogun 2. Just, again, they are a little weak to missile fire and stuff, but they have the most men in a unit for a gun unit, and they, 1 volley can decimate pretty much any other unit in the game. They can kill any cavalry units. So just overall, an amazing unit, especially with the veteran upgrades. All right, we have the Schengen Sword Masters next. We're going to throw them here in the overpriced. They're hero units, so, you can use them somewhat, but that's just a lot of money, and they're not really going to pay off too much. I mean, they'll get more kills than the people they brought, but overall, just not really worth the price. Next up, we have the Daiku Samurai. The Daiku Samurai are going to go on this godly tier right here. Now, the Daiku Samurai is the best bow unit in the game, in my opinion, and it's because of their armor and the amount of men in their unit. So, the Daiku Samurai have more men than the Bow Warrior Monks, and you can eventually upgrade them to where, their reload speed and accuracy may not be the same, but ultimately it will be close enough that they can pretty much just beat any other missile unit. And they also can have the increased range bonus to get up to 200 range. So, pretty formidable bow unit. Next up, we have the Matchlock Samurai. Matchlock Samurai, a great unit. I'm gonna place them probably right, I'd say right here for now. They might be behind the Bow Warrior Monks, honestly, but we'll place them here for now because overall, just they have good armor, they have the gun, so again, they can just decimate any units. They don't have the same amount of men as the Matchlock Ashigaru. They're not as cheap, so you can only upgrade them a couple of times as a veteran before they start getting a little expensive. But good armor, decent reload and accuracy, and to top it all off, they have some melee attack and melee defense, so they can stay in melee for a little bit. Overall, a good unit to have. If you've unlocked them, I recommend using them because they can be pretty devastating too, and definitely tough to fight. All right, next up we have the Bulletproof Samurai. And I think we're going to throw this unit here in the Great tier as well. They come with a lot of armor, 9 armor, and they're a little expensive if you upgrade them as a veteran, but they have the Yari and they have rapid advance, which helps them get key buildings really, really quickly. So overall, a pretty great units. One, if you have the DLC, I recommend using them, especially if you're fighting matchlocks. But they're also just pretty good in melee and have overall good stats. All right, next up we have the Donderbus Calvary. The Donderbus Calvary we're going to place right up here. The cheaters. This unit is a cheat code. This has broken Shogun 2 wide open. They have really short range, but their damage is insane. They, if they get a good volley off, they can kill half a unit, pretty much half a unit of Naginata Samurai, and hell, they can tear through Bulletproof Samurai. I mean, they have they have a shotgun on a horse, so it's just a broken unit in all sense of in every sense. All right, next up we have Yari Samurai. We're gonna place the Yari Samurai here on this great tier. I mean, you could put them in cost efficient, but if you upgrade them enough, they can be kind of expensive. But overall, I put them on the great tier because of their rapid advance. They're really good at capturing key buildings. They have a good enough bonus versus Calvary to be really good at catching some Calvary. And overall, decent stats to where they can hold up in melee for some time as well. Certainly not to the level of Katana Samurai and Warrior Monks, but definitely good enough to have a place in your armies for sure. Next up, we have the Matchlock Warrior Monks. The Matchlock Warrior Monks we're going to place on the great list and probably down here. Overall, they're a good unit. They have that extended range ability, which is really nice, and they can be really good as a trap or in the woods, like hidden. But overall, just the lack of armor makes them vulnerable to missiles, so that's why they're only at the bottom of the great tier. Next up, we have Katana Calvary. I'm going to place Katana Calvary here in the decent tier, and probably right here underneath the Naginata Warrior Monk Calvary. Katana Calvary can be really useful if you upgrade them enough. They can fight other sword units and be pretty powerful, but they're really weak against other cavalry, so ultimately that's why they're falling under the decent category. Their cost is about 768, so they're relatively cheap, and a pretty good unit to have maybe one or two of in an army. They can do some damage when used properly and cut through a good amount of units. Next up, we have the Dachi Samurai. The Dachis we're going to place right about here on the great tier. Now, these guys perform super well in multiplayer. Definitely the bonsai ability helps a lot. The only problem with them is that if you don't get a good charge, they can get stuck in prolonged melee, and at that point, their lack of melee defense and lack of armor gets the better of them. So definitely want to use this as a flanking unit for sure. Next up, we have Light Cavalry. We're going to place Light Cavalry in the cost-efficient category because really good cost, really super cheap, and can do really well at that price. They can certainly charge missile units. They can even get a sneaky charge on some other, your opponent's cavalry when they're not really looking, and do surprisingly well. So definitely a cost-efficient unit. Next up, we have the Spears of Shizugatake. What I'm going to do is I'm probably going to throw them at the end of the great tier maybe, or I'm tempted to put them in overpriced because they really are, but I'm going to throw them at the end of the great tier, and that's because the Spears of Shizugatake are one of the actually useful hero units because of their bonus versus cavalry. And because they can hold up enemy cavalry for quite a long time with their Yaris. Just overall, very powerful unit. The second wind ability is also really nice. But they're still really expensive, which is why they're not going to reach any further tiers. And I might honestly throw them down in decent, but they belong at the end of the great status for now. Next up, we have Naginata Samurai. And this unit, I'm probably going to place right about... probably here, right above the Bulletproof Samurai. Now, the reason I put them above the Bulletproof Samurai is because they don't cost as much as the Bulletproof Samurai, and they still have the same amount of armor. And they have Naginatas, so these guys are tanks. This is like your frontline troop that you want to bring. Eventually, they can get super expensive, for sure. But if you keep them at a reasonable veteran level, they can be a really good frontline unit to tank to allow your other units to encircle or to get a hammer and anvil off. So again, just overall a pretty good unit. Next up, we have Vogue Cav. We're going to place Vogue Cav here in the decent category, right about in the middle between these two units. I'm tempted to put them above the monks, but Vogue Cavalry is really good because they can, obviously they're very mobile. You can only bring 3 max, so obviously people used to spam them. And they can get a good amount of kills. The only problem is their missiles are super weak, so you want to be shooting at low armored targets. Eventually you can upgrade them though to where they can be pretty good and get a good amount of kills in the battle as long as you can protect them. Overall, just and a unit to definitely use for sure. Not a unit that will change the outcome of the battle, but a unit that you want to use for sure. All right, next up we have the Yarya Shigaru. The Yarya Shigaru belong on this godly tier, and probably right above the Daikus. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is a cheap Ashigaru unit. Why does it belong up here? Well, there's several reasons. First, cost. They're super cheap, and if you upgrade them as a veteran, they, as each upgrade continues, they still end up being relatively cheap compared to the other units upgrade. You can have rank 9 Yarya Shigaru that are just as cheap as a unranked Nodachi unit, around like 800 Koku or something. And they can also have some really good abilities. If you're a Spear Specialization clan, of course they can have Hold Firm, but also they have Yari Wall, so they're really hard to just punch through on occasion in a good front line and used really well with a pike and shot army. Next up, we have the Tatsubo Warrior Monk hero, I believe. We're going to throw them in overpriced. Just another overpriced hero. You can bring them. They can get more kills than what they bring, but still overpriced hero. We have the Great Guard next, and we're going to throw the Great Guard probably at the end of the Godly tier. And the reason being is because there's not really any other cavalry unit that's more superior than the Great Guard. I mean, the Hero Calvary, like the Spears of Shizugatake can, obviously have better stats, but overall the Great Guard, just all-around great units, have a full unit size, and second wind ability is really helpful because it affects not just the Great Guards themselves, but actually all of your, units around them. So definitely a unit to be the, elite shock cavalry that you need it to be, and very formidable on the battlefield. Next up, we have one of my favorite units, the Lone Sword Ashigaru, which are going to go right about there. Lone Sword Ashigaru can be one of the most powerful units in this game. You can get them to rank 9 and they'll still be cheaper than, or just under 1,000 Koku at least. And they can have Bonsai, Scare Enemies, and Inspire if you're Sword Specialization clans. So Scare Enemies and Bonsai is incredible, and you also can have full retainers to boost their melee attack, and their melee attack can get up to 26, 27, even with the Sword Dojo and Bonsai and things added on. So a really powerful unit, can cut through almost anything. They have a full unit size, or at least Ashigaru unit size, so they have more than any other sword units. They do have low morale and low armor, but if you're able to bring some retainers to boost them and able to capture some key buildings, they can win you a battle easily. And there's only a max of 4 that you can bring, so clearly people used to spam them because they were so good. Next up, I have the Gosenheim's Heroines. As much as I love some of these hero units, they are overpriced for multiplayer, so I'm going to have to throw them in there. Next up, we have the Warrior Nuns. And I'm going to place the Warrior Nuns in the decent category because although they lack the unit size, their cost isn't too bad, and they have a really good melee attack. I believe it's like 22 or 20 at least default. So they can be a pretty formidable unit, and you can certainly bring multiple Warrior Nuns. I don't know if I would consider them a front line, but they would be a really good troop to support in the melee, and really good auxiliary force. So definitely a unit that you could bring. Next up, we have the Katana Hero. I'm going to throw the Katana Hero probably in the decent category. It's one of the few heroes I actually like using. They're relatively cheaper compared to the other heroes. Not as good stat-wise, but ultimately you can use them. They have the aura around them that boosts the morale and other things of units around them. As long as you don't rank them up, they can be relatively cheap. They still are I think 1,200 Koku or something, but overall just a hero unit that I think you can definitely bring. All right, next up we have the Bose Samurai. The Bose Samurai definitely belongs in this tier. Right about here, I would say, on the great tier. Really good units. If you upgrade them a couple of times, you can increase their range to about 175, and they can be relatively cheap as well. So a unit you want to use for sure in the battle. They have really good armor, so they could probably outduel Bow Warrior Monks even, and they certainly can hold their own in melee for a little bit as well because of that armor and melee defense that they have. All right, next up we have the Portuguese Tarasos. This unit we're probably going to throw on the decent category as well. It just depends. If you don't upgrade them, they really stay in this position, but if you upgrade them, they probably become overpriced, but still really powerful gun unit. They can have really good reload speed and accuracy, and they have pretty good melee attacks, so they can hold their own as well. Relatively, I think their stats are better than the default Katana Samurai when it comes to melee attack and melee defense, and they have good armor. So overall, pretty good unit, but not really cost efficient at the start. But as long as you don't upgrade them, they end up being a pretty solid unit to bring. So definitely one I wouldn't shy away from using if you have the DLC. Next up, we have European Cannons. This unit right here is a meme, a complete meme. Just they have an insane range. I guess you could maybe make a case that they'd be good against, in a siege, but ultimately, just this unit is silly. Everybody knows it's so bad, so inaccurate that if you're bringing it, it's a meme. It's a complete meme. All right, next up we have the Yari Hero. I'm going to throw them probably in the decent category as well. They're still a little cheaper than the Katana Hero, and relatively cheap enough to bring if you need a hero unit in a larger battle. But again, just for the price and for the lack of men in the unit, not really the best unit to use. All right, next up we have the Bow Hero. I'm going to put these guys in the overpriced. There's only so many bows firing from the Bow Hero. I mean, each arrow might kill, and they have insane range and morale and stats. But again, just you'd be better off bringing a melee hero, or just getting 2 bow units for the same price, almost, or maybe just an elite bow warrior monk or Daiku Samurai for about the same price as the bow hero. Next up, we have the Fire Calvary. One of the best units in the game, in my opinion. Probably going to put them actually right above the Great Guard because of the price. Just a really great unit. You can upgrade them a couple of times too as well to get some pretty good stats. Arguably can beat any cavalry unit on the battlefield aside from the Great Guard and the Hero Calvary. Really good in melee attack, better charge. So just a really good unit to have in your army, especially if you love using cavalry. All right, next we have the Benkai's Blades. We're going to throw them in this overpriced category right about here. Again, just another hero unit that has good stats, but just not really worth the price. Next up, we have Kiyomasa's Katana Calvary. Probably going to throw them here in the overpriced section as well. You could argue that the Spears of Shizukatake belong here too, but the Spears of Shizukatake have a really good bonus versus Calvary and hold up super well, whereas Kiyomasa's Katana Calvary have katanas, so they're good against infantry for sure. And maybe if you're fighting a bunch of Katana Samurai, you might want to bring these guys, but overall, just too expensive. Next, we have the General's Bodyguard, or your Avatar, which is going to go right here on the Godly tier. And the reason being is that your General is, and this is a little cheesy, but it's true, the most important unit in Shogun 2 multiplayer. Your General can have a tons of abilities, obviously, on Avatar Conquest with, they can be a bow general, a leadership, or a melee general. The melee general has the no penalty against spears, increased bodyguard size, a bonsai, just really, really a tank and a tour de force on the battlefield. Then you have the bow general, which has 200 range, armor piercing arrows. Each arrow kills. And of course, you have the leadership general, which has stand and fight, increase morale, scare enemies, inspire, and rally. So again, your general is the most important unit in the game. Morale is so important to Shogun 2, so have to put him there. Next up, we have the Naginata Warrior Monk Hero, and we're going to immediately, I would drop them down to pathetic maybe, but we're going to put them in overpriced. They have some armor, but again, they're still a little vulnerable to missile damage. And just really not worth it in comparison to even the other heroes. So we're gonna place them there. Next up, we have the hand mortars, another siege unit, and we're going to throw them pretty much down there. Really, really bad units. They have amazing range, but they do no damage. Just a waste of money. You have to bring a retainer just to bring them. You're better off just bringing fire rockets. And you're honestly almost better off bringing European cannons because they cost a little less. So never use the hand mortar unit, ever. All right, next we have the Firebomb Throwers. We're going to place them down here in the pathetic tier. I mean, they're super cheap, right? But ultimately just not a very good unit. Not a very good unit whatsoever. Friendly fire is the thing, so you can lose a lot of your own men. And they're not really that good. I don't see why you would ever use them personally. All right, next we have the Tokitata's Tanagashima, and we're going to throw these guys in the overpriced list as well. Really good stats, right, for a gun unit. Amazing stats, but they're a hero unit, so there's only a small amount of guns firing at a time. I mean, even if each gun kills, if half of the Matchlock Ashigaru bullets kill, then you're better off just getting them in comparison to the Tanagashima. Really cool units. I don't mean to diss on the heroes too much, but at the same time, just for multiplayer, not really worth the cost. All right, next up we have the Mounted Gunners. This unit right here is the ultimate cheater. The ultimate cheater. Insanely good. I mean, pretty much Carbine Calvary from Fall of the Samurai with just less reload speed. Insane range. You can have up to, I think, 125 with increased range. Can kill a ton of units. They can be impossible to catch even. And if you protect them, they can win the battle for you. Get 400, 300 kills in a single match with those guys. All right, next up we have the Hero Calvary. We're going to place them right in about here on the decent tier. And the reason being is because it's a mobile bow cavalry units. They can, each arrow can kill. I would put them higher, but they're not, cost efficient. So we're going to place them in the middle of the decent tier. Definitely a unit that you can bring, but I wouldn't recommend it personally. If you really want to get like a really, powerful bow unit like this, I would just switch to a bow general. You might be better off, but this unit is still pretty good. All right, next up we have the Hanzo Shadows, and we're going to throw these guys right here. This unit is a meme. They're insanely powerful, and they're insane. Like, their cost is so expensive, but at the same time, they can hold down 4 units at a time, stealth abilities, and of course it's a ninja, so you can be really sneaky with their Kisho training, prolong your enemy's advance for a while. So they have some bonuses, but overall, I just put them as a meme personally. All right, next up we have Yari Calvary. We're going to put Yari Calvary right, I think, we'll put them right about here at the front of the great tier. Now, I am tempted to put them in the godly, but I think we're just going to put them right in front of the great tier because, let me fix this real quick. There we go. The Yari Calvary, just really great units, pretty cost efficient for a cavalry unit. You need them in your armies, especially if you don't have the DLC. They belong on this tier, but overall, with a veteran status, they can be really good. And this is the core of your cavalry right here. All right, next up we have the Marathon Monks. We're gonna put this unit probably right down, I would say right about here, and maybe actually here in the decent category. They're relatively expensive at 1200 Koku, I believe, but they do have Second Wind and War Cry. So those are two really good abilities to use, but you really don't want to rank them up. If you rank them up anymore, they fall down to the overpriced. But for now, we're going to place them right in the decent category. Next up, we have the Fire Protecting Mangonels. This is a god-awful unit. Probably the worst unit in Shogun 2 multiplayer, in my opinion. So inaccurate. Not really good. They almost belong on the meme list, probably, but we're going to place them right here at the bottom of the tier list. Next up, we have the Shimazu Heavy Gunners. We're going to throw this unit probably right here on the decent tier and probably put the Katana Hero back there. And actually, we'll probably put this Vogue Cav Hero here as well. The Shimazu Heavy Gunners used to be really broken. They got nerfed a little bit, but now they're relatively good. They're really slow. They can be pretty devastating if you know how to use them properly, but you're better off probably bringing any of the other Matchlock units because they're just... I just find that they perform better in battles, and I really don't see many people succeed with Shimazu Heavy Gunners who bring them. So I think you're better off getting any of the other Matchlocks. All right, next up we have the Kisho Ninjas, and I'm going to throw these guys probably in the cost efficient, but if not, I will definitely put them right in this great tier, probably above the Spears of Shizugatake. This unit can be really helpful, especially if you do like a ninja builds army composition, and they can surprisingly do really well with the blinding grenades, and they have a lot of unique abilities. I mean, they do lack the unit size though, but at the same time, they have really good stats to back it up. So as long as you protect them from missiles and everything, they can be a really powerful unit, and they can possibly win some battles for you with the explosions, and if you use them really well. And they're a really fun unit to use. They're almost also a meme as well because of ninjas, but at the same time, yeah, we're gonna place them in the great tier for now. And of course, the last three units here are just Ronin units from regular Shogun 2 campaign, and they're not in the multiplayer. So this right here is a full tier list we have for now. I think we might balance it out a little bit more just for my sanity. But I think we might throw down the Warrior Monk hero down here as a pathetic because all the other heroes are pretty much better than them. And we might throw down the bow hero here too also. But yeah, overall this is the full tier list. So again, you just want to bring the units up here. You want to avoid all the units down here. And I hope this video is helpful when it comes to playing multiplayer and Avatar Conquest in the future for all of you. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this tier list. Thank you all so much for watching.